On her 68th birthday, Susan Campbell stood in a silent law office, her black funeral dress still smelling faintly of lilies from her husband's memorial 3 weeks earlier. Across from her, her son Jonathan sat immaculate in a designer suit, fingers tapping impatiently on the mahogany desk. Their longtime attorney, Mr. Hoffman, cleared his throat, uneasy. "Before I begin," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I want to assure you that everything in this will is legally binding and exactly as Mr. Campbell instructed." Susan didn't yet know that sentence would destroy her world. Jonathan's name came first. He was granted the Los Angeles penthouse, Robert's primary investment portfolio, and control over all major holdings. Then came Susan's turn. "To my beloved wife, Susan Campbell," Hoffman read, "I leave the property located at 1420 Industrial Parkway, the garage and its contents." Silence fell like a slap. Jonathan's grief twisted into something else triumph. He leaned in close, his hand gripping her shoulder a little too tightly. "Don't worry, Mom," he whispered, smirking. "I'll make sure you're taken care of." That night, Susan returned to the penthouse she'd shared with Robert for 15 years, only to be greeted by boxes in the doorway. "I think it would be best if you found somewhere else to stay," Jonathan said flatly. She stared at him. "Jonathan, this is my home. Your father and I—" "It's mine now," he cut her off coldly. "Dad made that perfectly clear." When she begged for a few days, his voice hardened. "You're just a useless old woman, Mom. What would you even do with a real inheritance? Dad knew that." By midnight, Susan was driving aimlessly through the city, her suitcase on the passenger seat, tears blurring the streetlights. The key to the garage lay heavy in her palm. The building at 1420 Industrial Parkway was as desolate as her heart-rusted doors, cracked concrete, silence thick with dust. But when she forced the lock open, her flashlight caught something impossible, a gleaming silver grill beneath a cover. She pulled the cloth back with trembling hands. It was an Aston Martin DB5, pristine, shining like starlight under her beam. Behind it, two more shapes waited, a 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing Midnight Blue, a 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB 4 Blood Red, as perfect as the day it left the factory. Each had a leather portfolio beside it, filled with documents and meticulous records. Susan whispered, "Robert, what on earth were you doing?" On the wall, an envelope bore her name in her husband's handwriting. She tore it open, her hands trembling. "My dearest Susan, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've discovered what I meant by your final gift." The letter unfolded like a secret life. 6 years earlier, Robert had been diagnosed with a failing heart. He'd outlived the doctor's predictions by a year, but he'd known his time was running out. He wrote that he had watched Jonathan change. The once kind boy had grown calculating, dismissive, and controlling. Robert feared that if Susan inherited wealth directly, Jonathan would find a way to dominate it and her. "I couldn't bear to see that, so I designed this." The garage, he explained, was a sanctuary for 3 classic cars worth $12 million, hidden from everyone, even her. Inside a safe, she'd find documents to additional investments and properties placed in a trust solely under her name. "If Jonathan has treated you with love and respect, you may choose to share this with him. But if not, this is your freedom, your protection, and your independence." By the time she finished reading, tears had soaked the pages. Her husband hadn't betrayed her, he had saved her. When she found the safe behind their photo from Venice, she opened it using their anniversary date. Inside was everything Robert had promised: titles, bonds, investments, a vineyard, and several properties. The total value was beyond comprehension. That night, surrounded by cars worth more than she'd ever imagined, Susan wept not from loss, but from love rediscovered. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the spotless garage. There was even a stocked kitchenette, clean clothes in her size, and a shower. Robert had planned everything. Susan called the number from his letter. "Mrs. Campbell," said a calm British voice. "Marcus Weatherby. Robert told me you might call." Within hours, Marcus arrived elegant, silver-haired, carrying a leather folio. Over coffee, he explained Robert's vision. Your husband viewed cars as more than investments, Marcus said. He called them beautiful assets that could be both admired and protected. He wanted to leave you something you could touch, not just numbers on a screen. Susan listened, heart aching. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. After Marcus left, she spent the night planning her next steps. Her husband's foresight had turned tragedy into empowerment. Jonathan's cruelty had freed her from illusion. The next day, she contacted attorney Patricia Winters, recommended by Marcus. Patricia confirmed that Robert's estate planning was airtight. He was meticulous, she said. You're secure. Then Patricia suggested visiting a cottage in Carmel that Robert had purchased years earlier, fully furnished, under Susan's name. It was time to see where Robert wanted her to begin again. Before leaving the city, Susan visited the penthouse one last time. The home she had built was already stripped bare. Jonathan greeted her with impatience, checking his watch. I boxed up your stuff. The designers come tomorrow, he said. When she found Robert's sweater still faintly carrying his scent, she almost broke. But instead, she looked at her son and realized the man he had become. Jonathan, she said quietly, I'll take what matters to me. The rest is yours. He rolled his eyes. It's just stuff, Mom. In the back of the closet, she found Robert's leather messenger bag inside, another envelope addressed to her. If you find this, it's a backup of everything in the garage safe. That was the last time she saw the penthouse. Weeks later, when Jonathan couldn't reach her, he grew suspicious. He hired a private investigator. Soon after, he showed up at her cottage in Carmel, angry, sharp, and demanding answers. So this is why you disappeared, he sneered, glancing around the home. A secret vacation house? Tell me, Mom, how'd you pay for it? Susan stayed calm. It was your father's doing. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. And that garage? I looked inside. Cars worth millions, aren't they? You think I wouldn't find out? When he accused her of conspiring against him, she retrieved Robert's letter. If you want answers, read this. He read in silence. His face shifted from curiosity to disbelief to fury. So Dad thought I was selfish? He snapped. That's why he left me scraps while you get everything? Your father loved you, she said softly. He just wanted to see who you'd become. Jonathan's jaw clenched. Then I'll contest it. He can't hide assets and call it moral. Susan met his gaze with quiet strength. The law disagrees, and so do I. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. 3 months later, Carmel's autumn air grew cool and calm, but not for long. One afternoon, a polished woman arrived at Susan's door. I'm Diane Reeves, Jonathan's assistant, she said gently. He asked me to speak with you. He's facing financial trouble. The story was predictable. The penthouse renovations had collapsed into chaos. His investment project had failed, and the banks were circling. He was on the brink of losing everything. Susan said nothing until Diane finished. Please tell Jonathan, she replied, that I'll consider it. The next morning, Susan drove to Los Angeles. The penthouse that once symbolized success now stood gutted, exposed pipes, cracked marble, dust covering everything. Jonathan appeared, thinner, worn, the arrogance drained from his face. I wanted to see it myself, she said quietly. He sighed, defeated. I overextended. I thought the project was solid. Then everything collapsed. You didn't reach out sooner, she said. Why? Pride, he admitted. Maybe stubbornness. Family traits, I guess. When he asked if she'd help, she didn't hesitate, but her tone was steady. I will, Jonathan, but not unconditionally. She looked around at the wreckage. Meet me in Carmel tomorrow. We'll discuss the terms. The next morning, Jonathan arrived at the cottage neatly dressed again, trying to regain his composure. Susan had prepared the garden patio for their meeting. You have a beautiful view, he said stiffly. Your father chose it well, she replied. He flinched at the mention of Robert. Before they spoke of money, Susan handed him a folder. Your father commissioned these reports years ago, she explained. They warned about the penthouse's foundation issues. You called them boring back then. Jonathan glanced at the documents, guilt flickering in his eyes. He tried to warn me, he murmured. He did, she said. About more than buildings. They sat in silence before Susan spoke again. "I'll help you, Jonathan, but this time there will be structure, oversight, responsibility, and I need something in return." He frowned. "What conditions?" "You'll accept financial counseling, repay what's possible, and—" She paused, meeting his eyes. "You'll make amends. To me." His voice dropped. "You mean, for what I said?" "I mean for what you believed," she answered. "For how you treated your father's memory. For how easily you dismissed love as weakness." Jonathan looked away, his throat tightening. "I was angry." "No," she said gently. "You were blind." The following weeks marked the quiet rebuilding of both fortune and faith. Susan established a trust to stabilize Jonathan's debts, but kept control of the funds. He would rebuild under supervision, one careful step at a time. For the first time, he didn't argue. He listened. He showed up. He apologized awkwardly at first, then genuinely. Sometimes, Susan caught glimpses of the boy. Robert once adored the one who still existed beneath years of pride and ambition. Her own life blossomed in Carmel. The garage in Los Angeles remained sealed, cars gleaming under Marcus's care. She often drove the Aston Martin along the coast, feeling Robert's presence beside her. One evening she received a message. "Mom, thank you. I'm trying to be better. I think Dad would have wanted that." She smiled, tears welling. Standing by her window, she looked out at the ocean, the last rays of sunset painting the waves gold. "Robert," she whispered, "you were right. Sometimes we have to lose everything to learn what matters." The useless old woman her son once threw away had become something far greater. A woman reborn, with wisdom earned through pain, love preserved through loss, and dignity no one could ever take again.